QIMR Berghofer acknowledges the traditional and cultural custodians of the lands, waters and seas across Queensland, and we pay our respects to elders past and present. We support the cultural knowledge, determination and commitment of First Nations communities in caring for health and well-being for millennia.
Colon cancer is showing up in younger people in Australia, and it's a common cancer, often with really good outcomes if found early. Today, the exciting new possibilities for treatment for so many people, but the steps you can take to avoid it.
This is Body Lab, a QIMR Berghofer podcast.
Our guest today, Associate Professor Michelle Wykes, leader of the molecular immunology group here at QIMR Berghofer. She's the founder of Fibre Therapeutics, developing novel immunotherapies for cold cancers, or the most common cancers. And she also looks at triple-negative breast cancer. Very passionate about cancer prevention. She basically wants to do herself out of a job. Thank you so much for joining us, Michelle.
Hi, Claire. Lovely to be here.
A little bit about you first. You've been here for over 2 decades and you started out in malaria research. That's quite a leap, but not completely strange for scientific research.
No, it isn't. So when I came back from Oxford, I was interested in studying immunology, the immunology of malaria. When my son was in hospital, very sick with influenza, I had time to think about mothers in Africa who were losing their children to malaria. So when I went back to the lab, I actually wanted to cure malaria, and I started to study this disease in depth. What I found in these last 2 decades is, 1, lethal malaria, triple-negative breast cancer, and MSS colon cancer, which makes up 85% of all cancers, all colon cancers, is actually sharing the same immunological defect. So if you can cure one, you can cure the other. So we set out to cure malaria, and we realized we could probably cure triple-negative breast cancer and MSS colon cancer. This is not to say we can't cure other cancers at the moment, but we are focusing on the one with the greatest need. And so that is why I'm here to talk about colon cancer.
Interesting phrasing, Michelle. And I noticed that you used cure. Now, something sticks with me. You told me a very long time ago, when you first started out in this kind of research, you said something and the response was really shocking.
Yes. So when I transitioned from working on malaria to cancer, someone who had known me for quite a while said, "Oh, so you're working on cancer?" And I, with enthusiasm, said, "Yes, I want to cure cancer." And she burst out laughing, really a hearty laugh. And I stopped and said, "Why are you laughing?" And she said, "You want to cure cancer." And my thought and response was, well, yes, I want to cure the disease. I don't just want to extend people's lives. I want to give them their life back. And so that was why I wanted to cure the disease rather than just giving them a little bit longer.
It was quite big news, and the world stood up and noticed when you developed a master switch technology, and that is aimed at treating these cold cancers. What are cold cancers and why are they so challenging?
Generally, scientists split the cancers you can get into cold cancers and hot cancers. A hot cancer is where you have this cancer and all the immune cells have flooded into the cancer to try and kill it. And so current therapies are really quite good at controlling those cancers. Cold cancers are ones where the immune cells that are going to kill the cancer cells are not sitting in the tumor. They're circulating. And so these have been more challenging to cure. What we found was this immune defect seems to turn up in cold cancers, hence my enthusiasm. So it turns out cold cancers have a kind of immunological change, and we can fix that problem. And so that is why I believe we could cure the cancer. And we've seen really outstanding results in mice, which other studies have not. When we test these treatments in mice, these mice have triple-negative breast cancer or colon cancer. That's the size equivalent to a human having a 2 to 5 centimeter large tumor. So these are sizable tumors. We give them the treatment, and not only do the tumors dissolve, but they actually don't come back after 300 days, which is quite a long lifespan for for the mouse. Not only that, we then challenge them with new tumors, and those tumors don't grow in most of the mice, sometimes never in all the mice. So what we think is if you reset the immune system will then sort of surveil around the body, looking for new tumors and destroy it before it comes back. So that is where our enthusiasm comes from.
It must have been a pretty exciting day in the lab.
I still get goosebumps over it. When I look at the curves, originally I used to go into the animal house to look at the mice themselves, and I would be really surprised at how they were dissolving away. I still get excited, and sometimes I do get shocked, like, is this real? It's just one of those things because it is so wonderful to see them get controlled, yes.
Obviously, you're very keen to prove that in humans, and that is a giant leap in terms of funding and research.
What most people don't know, that just to get the treatment from what's called preclinical, where you're testing it in mice, it literally costs $20 million to go from where we are to phase 1A, 1B trials where we're testing it in humans. This is a very expensive process because there's a lot of risk management. You don't want people to get sick with the antibody. You want to make sure there are hundreds of tests to make it safe. There are things called GMP manufacturing where they're really in a good state, made in a very clean way, safe for humans. And it's really hard to get these large amounts of money in one go, and that has been quite a process to attract investment. I'm happy to say that we have managed to attract smaller amounts of money, and that's how we keep progressing. So we've taken the attitude, whatever comes, we will put into the study. You get a little bit more economical when you have very little money, but you keep progressing. And the idea is once we have enough data, the bigger pharmaceutical companies or venture capitalists with money will invest in us.
You're very vocal about preventing colon cancer through diet. And what inspired you to get in that end of the fight? Because you don't, as a researcher, typically see patients.
So once we started this treatment, we started actually meeting patients, which hadn't happened before. And suddenly you realize some of them were really young. Justine Dillon, who was a big supporter of my research, was very young. And you start thinking, why? I have a child, he's 25, and I ask myself, why? What is it? There's a lot of misconception about diet out there. And so the idea is not to stop anyone eating their burgers, because God knows I love my burgers, but it's to understand what is really happening when you eat the burgers and what is actually missing when you eat those burgers. So it's not about just having those burgers, that's fine. It's what you've got to do to support yourself once you've eaten those burgers.
What?
Fibre.
This is really interesting, and we've had this conversation before, Michelle. Even you, knowing everything that you know, had a good look at what you were doing and discovered that you weren't eating enough fibre.
So when I first started to think about the fibre, I thought I was doing amazing. I'd have a piece of meat and some, half a broccoli on my plate, maybe something else. I'm doing well. It was when I read you needed 20 to 25 grams for a woman and 25 to 30 grams of fibre for a man that I started to think, how much is this broccoli giving me? And then I realized, as broccoli is amazing, it's got all these amazing chemicals to help you stay healthy, it really had only about 2.5 grams of fibre in 100 grams. So now I'm thinking, how much am I getting? And I was probably not hitting 10 grams, and yet I thought I was eating healthy. So we became fastidious at home about counting the grams and fibre in everything we ate. And what became clear, the foods that we eat, such as broccoli and beans or any of those vegetables, is amazing. They're going to give you all the vitamins and nutrients, but they are not there for the fiber. Not saying they don't give you fiber, it's better than eating a piece of bread, but they're not the source of fiber. So we started looking at other options, and that's when we realized, if you look back to older times, people had a slightly different. They bulked up their meals with chickpeas or beans, these, or even an avocado. Love avocados. They're the ones that really have great fiber, and they're the ones we shouldn't feel guilty about eating, but enjoy them because they actually bring something else to your diet.
You can still have a burger and you can still have things, but you just need that bulky fibre to push it all through.
A little bit more complex than that. So the burger's amazing. Go ahead and fill your soul with happiness when you eat that burger.
Thank
Not
you.
saying no. But what I would say is, why is the burger not good for us? Because we think it's got meat, a piece of lettuce, and some tomatoes. Well, the problem is that's not got fiber. And so then you're saying, so when you eat your burger, one, you're missing out on nutrition. So that is the reason. And people think, oh, I've eaten the burger, I'm going to put on weight. And that's quite true. What they don't understand, the burger, by eating that burger, they missed out on nutrition and they missed out on fiber. So that comes to the question of fiber. Now, years ago, people thought fiber was all bran, that cereal that's quite heavy. And that is 1/3 of the equation. That fiber is really good. Think of that fiber as a scrubby brush that's pushing everything through your digestive tract, okay? The scrubby brush is pushing it all through. But there are other kinds of fibers, like, say, soluble fibers. And I don't know why I keep coming back to avocados, but maybe I'm hungry. But the avocado has soluble and insoluble, right? And the insoluble is the scrubby brush part. But the soluble fiber has other qualities. And one of them, for example, is to actually provide nutrition for the bacteria in your gut. And that is why it is so important to have insoluble fiber as well as soluble fiber. And that leads on to the bacteria. It is well established that the bacteria in the gut actually control how healthy your gut is. And so that comes to the crux of cancer. You really need to have healthy microbiome in your gut. You've got different bacteria in your gut, and what you need to do is have a diversity, not one type of bacteria, but many strains. The second thing is you don't want to mess that bacteria. You want it to be kind of stable. So let me give you an example. When you have antibiotics, you kill off half the bacteria, the other remain. The body doesn't like that. So that is why people say antibiotics are bad. Not only does it affect your gut, but you introduce and you create antibiotic-resistant traits. That's another story. Then you want a balance of greater good bacteria to not so good or bad bacteria. So it's all about keeping that little community of bacteria in your gut stable. And there are many ways to do that, of course.
Some examples?
Well, there are a couple, but a good starting point would be prebiotic fibers. Now, prebiotic fibers are really food for those bacteria in your gut. So when you have this good fiber coming through, the good bacteria munch on it and get really happy and grow fast, and the bad bacteria have no interest in it. So now you're already improving the ratio of the good bacteria to the not so good bacteria. The next one would be probiotics. You'll all hear of it, and I'm not an expert, but they usually have an abundance of all these bacteria that are good for you. Now, let me clarify. You don't want to get overfilled on what you call the good ones because there could be other problems. But what you want to do is maintain a balance. Remember the word balance? I am sorry to say stress affects your microbiome. So this is something people say it's bad for you, but no one quite explains. And this is one element. Stress can affect your microbiome. And the last point, I guess, is the scrubby brush concept, which is you want that insoluble fiber to push things through and keep it all clean. So I think those are the things you would aim for.
There is things that people misunderstand about diet and cancer risk. For example, some foods have fallen into a category where people are a bit nervous about them.
I get that because that was happening to me. So you put on a bit of weight and everyone says cut back on your sugar. And, you'll keep the ice cream, but you'll get rid of the fruit because it's got fructose. What they don't realize is fruit in moderation as part of a really balanced diet offers a lot of fiber and nutrients. So, for example, passion fruit and dried figs have the highest levels of fiber in the fruit world. Guavas, blackberries, a medium avocado can have 10 to 14 grams of fiber. Now, I agree that's a lot of calories from the but this is still good nutrition for your body. So my suggestion is that you really need to think about how you expend the calories in a day. Make foods such as fresh, nutritious fruits don't completely cut them out, but you eat them in moderation, but introduce fiber into your diet. Maybe do what we did. We started counting fiber. And that was how we realized, having that half an avocado wasn't the worst thing in one meal, where we really were getting a big 1/3 of all the fiber I needed for one day. An apple has about 5 grams. So, who doesn't enjoy an apple? That's your 5 grams. So now you've got 25% for a woman. That's 25% of the day. So start thinking about these as getting your fiber needs as well as getting nutrition.
So if I wanted to make one change to lower my risk, is there something that you'd recommend?
I'd say list everything you ate yesterday and then work out how much fiber was in each food. And that will be the awakening call that I had when I thought I was doing well. And we started counting and we realized, well, guess what? The coffee didn't have any. And then I thought the sandwich, well, that's a couple of grams. And the ham didn't have any. And the chicken teriyaki doesn't have any. So suddenly you start realizing what seemed like a very nutritious meal was really missing fiber.
Can I ask you a sample of one?
Yeah.
Did you feel differently when you made these changes?
To some level, yes. You do feel a kind of lifting of brain fog. So once I said I can eat fruit and I can eat avocados and I can eat these things I truly enjoy, pineapple, love pineapple. What I found was that when you're eating nutritious food, your brain lights up. There is definitely a sense of well-being that comes from watching your diet, which I'm trying. Please be clear, I have not perfected this. We are a work in progress, but at least I'm working on progress rather than ignoring it. So count your fiber for yesterday.
What are the immediate next steps for your research and the development of your immunotherapy?
We are at the end of what they call preclinical development. We now actually have to make this drug in a situation where it's getting ready for manufacturing. So before you can do clinical trials, you've got to make the drugs in a form that you can manufacture, and then you've got to test that the manufacturing is working. Then you make big batches to put in people and what other tests you'll do. So we're at that stage, trying to get that stage completed.
That researcher who laughed at you in years to come?
I'm going to be generous.
Next steps for you, Michelle, and your team in the research, in the development of immunotherapy?
So our next steps is to actually start getting ready to put these immunotherapies into people as part of clinical trials. And this involves actually getting ready to manufacture the drug. It has to be done to a very high level, which is why it's so expensive. And so we are now looking for funds to take those steps through to a phase 1 trial. And our hope is that this immunotherapy comes out at the other side in the next 4 years, ready to go into subsequent trials and then into people who have these cold cancers and really currently have very few options.
If you would like to donate or support or even know more about Associate Professor Michelle Wykes and her team's work or any of our research, QIMRB.edu.au. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thanks for having me.